Hello, fellow Movie Crusaders, and welcome to another episode of Sean's Movie Crusades. My name is Sean Wasserkrug, and today we are going to be reviewing one of my most anticipated films of 2019, and that is It Chapter 2. Now, most of you people who know me know that I was a huge fan of It Chapter 1. It was in my top 5 films of, I believe it was 2017 when it came out. It could be 2016, I'm pretty sure it's 2017. I could be wrong on that. But I loved the first film. I thought the child cast did a great job. I loved just the way the film was horror, but had a ton of heart, with some humor in it based off of the young cast. And I thought Bill Skarsgård did a fantastic job as Pennywise in that. Now, a lot of people who do know me personally know that I am petrified of clowns. If a clown gets near me, it needs to get away or I'm going to kill it. And it's all because of what the original It, the 1990 miniseries It did to me, played by the wonderful Tim Curry. But a lot of people know the original 1990 It was a 2-night miniseries where night 1 was the children's story and night 2 was the adult story. And critically, for pretty much everybody, and even me personally, the first half with the children is 1,000 times better than the second half with the adults. The adult actors just weren't as the chemistry wasn't quite there, the acting wasn't quite there, the scares weren't there. Just everything about the second half was just dull and kind of boring compared to the actual horror that the first half brought when they were children. So that was a big worry going into It Chapter 2, was that just like in the 1990 miniseries, Part 1 is the ideal best part of the book, with Part 2 being adults is kind of boring. It's not, the scares aren't quite there, and they don't really give a whole lot for the grown-up characters to do in the book. So that was a big worry coming into this, but more people coming out, with Andy Muschietti, the director, actually putting this at 2 hours and 49 minutes, and that there's also a 4-hour cut somewhere out there that we're probably going to get when it comes out on like digital and Blu-ray, got me really, really excited, because I love the young cast which they brought back for this, and I love most of with the announcements of who was going to play the older versions of the young cast. There were some big names there with James McAvoy, Jessica Chastain, Bill Hader, and then the rest were kind of, people who you may be seeing on TV shows or commercials and stuff like that. So just with the cast they were bringing in for this adult version of the sequel had me really, really excited, and which is why it was one of my most anticipated films of 2019. So let's go ahead and jump into the review and see what I thought of It Chapter 2. Now, going into the plot, for anyone who has never seen the 1990 film or has never read the book, It by Stephen King, It Chapter 2 takes place 27 years later from the events of It Chapter 1, where Mike Hanlon, played by Isaiah Mustafa from Old Spice fame, which took me a little bit to get used to him without going, look at your girl, now look at me, now look at her, looking at me. Like, I kept wanting to see that, but after about 10 minutes of him, I was zoned in. But anyway, it takes place 27 years into the future, which we know from the events of the first film, that Pennywise the clown, or what they like to call It throughout the entire book and the film, comes back every 27 years to feed. And at the end of the first film, they all made a pact that if It ever came back, that they would all come back no matter where they were to finally put an end to it. So we're 27 years into the future, basically present day in terms of the actual story. And Mike is the only one that's still in Derry, Maine. And he finds out that, yes, Pennywise has returned, and basically has to kind of call and corral everyone from the Losers Club back to Derry, where they don't really remember what happened. Basically, them leaving Derry kind of almost was like in a trance. They don't really remember the events of the first film. They don't remember Pennywise. They don't remember, it's kind of like a haze to them. And so it's all about them coming back together. Pennywise actually wanting them to come back because it's kind of a vendetta, a revenge of him. He wants them back. He needs them back. He's been savoring them for 27 years, and while, yes, he is killing other children, he wants them. And so he's doing what he can to get them, as well as them trying to take care of him as well. So it's a good back and forth. But that's the general plot. Basically, 27 years later, the group comes back as adults to try and take out Pennywise for the last time. Now, what works with It Chapter 2? This is going to be kind of a weird review for me. I'm gonna tell you that right off the bat. Because I've seen what the reviews of this film, because obviously people have got to see this before I have. And, I mean, even though I am seeing this on a Thursday night, there have been reviews out. There have been thoughts of the film already that I've kind of heard rummagings of. Because me personally, I don't like to read reviews before seeing a film because I don't want that perception in my mind going into it. So usually after the film, I'll obviously do my review, and then I'll watch other people's reviews to see if I'm kind of on the same wavelength with them. This time around, after the movie, I actually watched some of the reviews to kind of just see where everyone's head's at, because the way the reviews were going, my thought process was a little bit different, and I kind of wanted to see where the misconnection was. And I see their points. I see what they're trying to say, and I see my points, and so this is kind of a different review. Normally I do what works, what doesn't work, and then overall thought, which I'm still going to try to do that same kind of format. But It Chapter 2 is by no means a perfect film. It's not. But there's a lot to like, and there's a lot of things that they could have done better. So I will kind of intertwine a little bit between it, at least the way I'm spitballing this, it might come off that way, or maybe I'll do this perfectly fine, you won't have to worry about it. But there's a lot to like about It Chapter 2. Bill Skarsgård as Pennywise. He gets a lot more to do in this film, and he does a great job. He gets more dialogue, he gets to do more, he gets to have a lot more fun in the film. Now, a potential negative to that is that, and I heard this in a review by someone else, and as soon as they said it, it was like, oh, yeah, that is totally what it's like. It's a lot like Freddy Krueger. Whereas in the first Nightmare on Elm Street, he was straight up horror, murder, monster, creature, killer kind of thing. And then whereas in the later films, he was more kind of zany and poppy and more comical while killing. And Pennywise is kind of like that in this. He's in the first film, he's very straight to the point. He likes to torture the kids because their fear is like flavor on them, so that's why he likes to play with his food per se in the first film. Whereas this one, they're adults, so he kind of has to do it a little bit differently, but he's gonna just mess with them, and not in a way that he would with kids. He's messing with them like mentally and physically, but he's having fun with it. So there's a lot more comic relief in this film when it comes to the scares, which wasn't something that necessarily worked for me, because there are moments where the horror should be at a 10, or at least around an 8 to 10 range, and I was like, this is actually a really scary moment. But the way they kind of portrayed the scares in certain scenes, the audience I was with was laughing instead of being scared. You have half the audience who's terrified of what's going on, and then you have the other audience who's laughing at it because it's kind of Evil Dead-ish. The CGI on certain things is more for the gross and humorous than it is towards the upright trying to scare the living crap out of you. So some of those scares worked and some of those didn't for me in that respect, but I liked them for the most part. It's just some of them looked a little more zany than terrifying. But when they go the terrifying route, It Chapter 2 does it full throttle. It does it intensely and beautifully. Two huge moments for me in It Chapter 1 that I loved in terms of like scare is the scene in the garage, which anyone who knows that scene is when Pennywise finally kind of pops out at them. That moment was intense and terrifying. And then of course the infamous refrigerator scene inside the well house, where he is going after Eddie. Those two scenes were beautifully crafted, beautifully well done in the first film, and there are scenes to that magnitude in It Chapter 2. When those scenes happen, they're done beautifully and creatively. And then there are certain scenes in the film, such as the one we've all seen in the trailer of when Beverly goes to her old house and the old lady's there. When we actually get to see the actual end result of that scene, because we don't get to see that in the trailer, but when we actually get to see the end result, it's a mix of horror but also comical at the same time. So that mix, I mean, for audiences, that'll work for a lot of people. For me, I want more of the horror than the comical for this kind of film. And so for me, it was kind of mixed in that respect. But in other areas of the film, I thought the horror worked incredibly well. The cast, I thought, for the most part, did a great job. Obviously, all the young actors from the first film come back. Yes, there are some de-aging special effects they're having to use because some of the actors obviously look a lot older now than they did in the first film. So the first time you see the young cast, it is a little jarring to the eye, especially for Finn Wolfhard and Jack Dylan Grazer, because those two actors, they've been around. We've been seeing them grow with Stranger Things, Shazam. So we've seen them grow from It Chapter 1 up to this point. So when they come on screen, you can clearly tell them and Jeremy Ray Taylor. He was also in the Goosebumps sequel. When they come on screen, you can actually tell that they've actually put some de-aging on them, because their faces just kind of have a little bit of an uncanny valley where they just don't look quite right. Now, after that initial first scene, they're fine. Even Jaden Martell, who plays young Bill, a little bit different. You can tell he's a little bit taller, a little bit like kind of you can see kind of the adolescence in him growing. But they do a decent enough of a job outside of that first scene where it's very jarring. After that, they all look fine. But they're all back. Their scenes in the film are highlights of the film because we know those characters, we love those characters, and we love those actors and actresses, including Sophie Lillis. So when their flashback scenes come up, they're awesome. They're great scenes. They add more scares because of it. And basically what that part is, they're showing the part of Chapter 1 that we didn't get to see for the most part when they all separated. And so we're seeing scenes that happened during that time frame. And I like those scenes. I thought most of those scenes actually did a really good job. And some characters in the first film that maybe didn't get enough of a spotlight on got more spotlight in this one in the younger stages. Now going to the adult cast, I love this adult cast. I was super happy with what we got. Anyone who remembers the 1990s version, older Bill is a bore. I didn't like the actor who played him. His character's just kind of there to kind of be the leader, but he just doesn't look like he really wants to be a part of it. In this one, we got James McAvoy. And we all know James McAvoy is going to put everything he's got into every role he's in. I mean, he just did Glass earlier this year. Now, I personally was not a fan of Glass. It's easily one of my most disappointing films of the year. But the one thing I loved about Glass was James McAvoy's performance of the Beast. And in this one, I think McAvoy does a fantastic job as Bill. He brings that emotion that we got in the first film from Jaden Martell and pulls it to the forefront. He's still grieving over the loss of Georgie after all these years. He still feels responsible for it, and James McAvoy definitely plays that off incredibly well, and to the point where he has a kind of a separate side story with a neighborhood kid who he kind of sees Georgie in that respect. And so you have this kind of, will history repeat itself, or will he finally be able to stop Pennywise from taking another child? And that's a great side story that I thought worked really well for James McAvoy to give him a little bit more meat on the role, and he did a great job. Of course, Jessica Chastain as Beverly. I thought she did a fantastic job as Beverly. I thought her and Sophie Lillis had a good back and forth from young Beverly to older Beverly. I could see how both of them played the character. I could see them mesh in terms of the Beverly character working together. Could we have gotten more scenes of Jessica Chastain as Beverly? Absolutely. And that goes for most of the adult cast, because once we get them all into Derry and the initial plot starts to get into the kick of things, they kind of get all separated, which I wasn't really a big fan of, but it does spread them out and kind of gives them all their own individual scenes to kind of act and do their own thing, which I get why they did it. but because of that, they have to keep the movie going. And so there are certain moments where I was like, I wish we could have gotten more of these two together to develop some more of a relationship / chemistry together, and vice versa with all the other characters. But Jessica Chastain does a great job. The absolute standout of this film goes to Bill Hader. Bill Hader, for once, and yes, this if everybody haven't figured this out, this is going to be a long review. I was super excited for this film, so if you guys looking for a quick review, this isn't going to be it. Okay, I want to really dive deep into this film, and I'm going to do that. And yeah, so sit back and enjoy. With Bill Hader, he does a fantastic job as Richie. One thing that I was incredibly excited for with Bill Hader, I was so down on this guy when he first started out. I mean, he was on it, he was the SNL guy, and I thought this guy couldn't act to save his life. I remember back when he was in Night at the Museum 2, you could clearly tell he was still reading off cue cards when he was doing his lines in that film, and I was like, this guy sucks. But then you could tell he started maturing as an actor, becoming better. He has easily one of my favorite SNL characters of all time in terms of Stefan. And then now he's got a fantastic show where he's actually being nominated for Emmys, and I think he won last year in Barry, and that's a phenomenal show for anyone who hasn't seen that film. Go out of your way to watch Barry. But this movie, to me, is his kind of, I am a movie actor as well. He's got his great quick one-liners. He plays Richie the exact same way Finn Wolfhard did. Like I said, beautiful meshing of the younger cast to the older cast. And once we get to the end of the second act to the third act, Bill turns the level up to a 10 in terms of performance, and he is the standout performance from then on. Everything he's in. The emotional weight of the film lies on Bill Hader's shoulders going into the end of the film, and he does it beautifully, and he's definitely the one performance to pay attention to the most by film's end. And one of the great things about Bill Hader too was his beautifully comedic timing and chemistry with James Ransone, who plays older Eddie. I don't really know this actor very well. I haven't really seen him in much of anything, so he was kind of one of those no-name actors. I was like, all right, he's just playing the Eddie character, which was played by Jack Dylan Grazer. I loved Eddie. I thought James Ransone did a great job. Him and Richie's back and forth as Bill Hader were comedically beautiful together. They have a lot of the best humor, and like I said, towards the third act, they put all the heart into them, and a lot of it rides on their shoulders, and I think both of them do a great combo together overall. Like I mentioned earlier, Isaiah Mustafa, who plays Mike, in the moments where he gets to actually shine, I think Isaiah does a great job, but Mike just doesn't get a whole lot to do besides being the exposition piece of the film. He's there to explain everything. He's there to kind of catch everyone up to speed. But when he does get to actually break out of that exposition and actually do stuff in the film, I think Isaiah Mustafa does a great job, and I think this is going to be a good stepping stone for him to get out of that Old Spice commercial guy and become an actual actor. And then we also got Jay Ryan, who plays Ben. He's fine. I wasn't blown away by his performance. They basically just wanted a hunky guy to basically play Ben, who was played by Jeremy Ray Taylor, who I thought did a great job as young Ben. Jay Ryan was fine. He just doesn't do anything to wow me in this film. But Ben, the character Ben, even in the 1990s film and in the book, doesn't really get a whole lot to do. So I can't really blame Jay Ryan for that. Because it's literally just how the book was written for him. So he does a solid job in his performance. He just didn't blow me away like the rest of the cast did. And then, of course, Andy Bean plays Stanley. And in the parts he's in, I think he did a solid job. Anyone who knows the original film miniseries knows what happens to the Stanley character. Or anyone who's read the book. If you guys don't know either one of those, I'm not going to say what happens, but Stanley doesn't have as big as a role as the rest of the Losers Club. So, but in the pieces that we do get with Andy Bean, I thought he did a great job in it. We just didn't get enough of him. Like I said, the story, I like how it interwove between the young cast and the older cast. The scares worked for the most part when they weren't trying to be too comical. Skarsgård gets more to do with Pennywise, and I think he does a great job overall. And like I said, the young cast and the adult cast, for the most part, beautiful meshing together, and it works really, really well overall. And anyone who remembers the 1990 series, the ending, the final battle, I thought was really hokey, really cheesy, because obviously it was 1990. I felt like this time around, it was a lot better, and it's actually lengthy. The final battle is pretty lengthy, and I thought it was intense, it kept your attention, and it kept you grasped all the way up to the very end. Now, the actual end point of it, of the final battle, I mean, yeah, I'm not a fan of it, but that is literally how it was written in the book, so to knock the movie for that is not the movie's fault. That is literally how Stephen King wrote wrote the book, and the movie is doing the book justice by following what it was in the book. So, while we might not be a fan of how the initial end of the battle goes, that's just the way it was written. You can't blame the film for that. The film, could it have completely rewrote it and done something different? Absolutely. But Andy Muschietti is doing his best to try to follow the book to the most realistic it could possibly go based off of what this book is about. But yeah, I thought the final battle was really, really great. And real great mental mind Fs as well throughout the entire film, including in the final battle. So that's what really works for me. That's what I really liked about that. Now, what does not work, I kind of mentioned a little bit of the things, is some of the humor. While the humor is funny, the scare humor I wasn't really a fan of, because I wanted to be scared. Not that I really get scared, but I wanted that, like, holy crap, and not... I don't want to laugh in this movie. I want to laugh with the dialogue between the characters and even Pennywise. But when the actual scares are happening, I don't want to laugh at that. I want to be kind of like a, oh shit, kind of scares with it. So that didn't necessarily work for me. And even at the 2 hours and 49 minutes, which for me, the time didn't bother me. I thought it flowed very well. But there are a lot of parts in the film that come up that you think are going to get addressed later that don't. And so it's almost like with a 2 hour and 49 minute timeline, you can kind of tell where the 4 hour cut got cut down. Especially with the opening scene. I get it. They're trying to show how, just like in the first film, Derry's just a bad place because of Pennywise's evil is, over the town. But after that, they kind of just dropped the whole Derry being evil thing, and it just kind of focuses on the Losers Club, which was a big factor in the first film that they just kind of dropped in this one after the first scene. And there's a big character reveal at one point that you thought was going to come back later in the film, and it never does. Like I said, in the 4 hour cut, it probably does get brought up, it probably does get talked about, and like same thing with these scenes, it probably does come back around, but we just didn't get to see it in this final cut, so a lot of parts in this film just kind of get dropped and not mentioned again, and certain scenes or certain parts of the film probably needed a little bit more meat to them to, basically make them more stronger, and we just didn't get it. Even at 2 hours and 49 minutes, it almost felt that either you needed to add more time to get these stories, or take those stories out, which Andy Muschietti just wanted to put as much of the film as he could, which is why I personally cannot wait for the 4 hour cut of this film. I'm going to watch the hell out of it, because I want to see what did not make it into the final cut. But for some people who are not into the 2 hour, 49 minute movie, could they say there's about 20 minutes of film you could have cut? Absolutely. I personally would not have cut it. I wanted more of this film because it kept me engaged from first scene to end credits. But I can see where some people might find that as a negative. So yeah, because of that, like I said, some things are a little not necessarily out of order, but certain things are kind of just choppy in terms of the story transition. It just goes bam, 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 and then it tries to go back, and at that point, what they go back to isn't really important anymore, and so then it has to keep going. Like I said, the 4 hour cut probably does it a lot better, and it's more fleshed out, but even at 2:49, it's a pretty long movie. So for it to be 2 hours and 49 minutes, and for it to still have that kind of issue, not very good in that sense. Like I said, was it a huge problem for me? But I can see how it could be a problem for a lot of people. I think the scares, for the most part, work to the extent of what they're supposed to do. But because of the comedic timing of some of these scares, it doesn't necessarily make the movie as scary as the first film, because the first film was trying to just full-on scare you, and then the comedy was in the dialogue of stuff happening around the scares, whereas this one is trying to be funny in the scares. And so because of that, should this movie have been scarier than the first film? Absolutely. There are way scarier moments in this film than in the first one. But because of some of the comedic stuff they pull and how some of the scares look, it comes off more comical to the point where I was just like, you know, you could have hit this, made this scarier, you could have hit this harder, but it's coming off Evil Dead comedy, and I don't want It Chapter 2 to be funny, I want it to be scary. And so, like I said, that's my main problem with it. I know I mentioned it earlier, but I'm trying to wrap up the whole what doesn't work for me. But yeah, so overall thoughts. Like I said earlier, is It Chapter 2 a perfect film? No. I loved this movie, though. I think it is a beautiful sequel to the first film. Is the first film, in its essence, a better film overall? Absolutely. When we get the 4-hour cut of this, will that movie potentially be better at that point? We shall see. But putting the two films up against each other, there's so much more in Chapter 2 than there is in Chapter 1, but Chapter 1 is a tighter, stronger film overall than It Chapter 2. Doesn't mean I loved It Chapter 2 any less. It is one of my favorite films of the year. I loved this movie. I can't wait to see this movie again. I loved all the performances for the most part in this film. I loved the scares when they were going for scary and not funny. I highly recommend this film for anyone who loved the first film and has to see the ending. I personally, cannot wait to go see this again. Strong recommendation. Just keep your expectations kind of in the middle. And don't go in super high, because like I said, there are certain parts of the film that you're probably not going to enjoy based off of what you saw in the first film. And like I said, that's just because of the way they did this one around, but I still really love the film overall. So going into the top 10 films of 2019 so far, it definitely gets in the top 10. Is it better than some of the movies that I have it ahead of? No. But right now, I'm super high on the film. I really enjoyed it overall. And because of that, it's rated higher than probably what it should be. Will it drop lower probably throughout the year? Possibly. It definitely probably won't get any higher than it is right now. But right now, I'm super high on this film. Like I said, I strongly recommend it. So going into the top 10 films of 2019, Toy Story 4 is still going to be at the number 1 spot, with Avengers Endgame at number 2. I swear, on any given day, those two flip-flop for me. Peanut Butter Falcon is at number 3, with Rocket Man at number 4. It Chapter 2 coming in at the number 5 spot, with Spider-Man Far From Home at number 6. Booksmart at number 7. Jordan Peele's Us at number 8. John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum at number 9. With Once Upon a Time in Hollywood at number 10. With Good Boys dropping out of the top 10. I hope you guys enjoyed this review, and if you guys did, go ahead and hit that like button. If you guys feel like this review is worth sharing, go ahead and hit that share button. But most importantly, don't forget to hit that like button on Sean's Movie Crusades on YouTube, so that way you guys stay up to date with all the latest videos that pop up on the channel. And also don't forget to follow us on all the social media outlets you see below. I'm currently working on scheduling a spoiler review of this, where we can actually dive into this film full throttle. We'll bring in the usual suspects. If you guys have been watching the show, you guys know who those people are. And we'll really deep dive into It Chapter 2. It'll be a lengthier review than even what this one is. So if I can get the people to do that, I'm going to try to get that out this weekend. If not, then that's just the way the cookie crumbles. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the review. Next week, if I can go see it, the Golden Finch comes out. Hearing kind of, I might check it out. I don't know if I'm going to check it out or not yet. I probably will, let's face it. So, potentially be on the lookout for that review coming up. And, yeah, until next time, in case I don't see you, good morning, good afternoon, and good night, Movie Crusaders.